In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to use PydanticAI, which is a new agentic framework by Pydantic, how to put together a nice workflow where you will be able to chat and ask about the weather in certain locations in the world, and then you get something nicer, something more than just the weather. You'll get, in this case, coordinates of the place that you've typed, that you've asked about, as well as a nice poem and also some other information such as the news headlines of that location. All of that using PydanticAI. I'm actually falling in love with PydanticAI. Nothing strange. I'm happily married with 2 children, but this is the tech that I like. I'm not going to marry PydanticAI. That's just not possible. Let's go ahead and get started here. Keep in mind that I've already put together the video where I show you how to get started with PydanticAI. You can find it somewhere up here or below in the description, or you can just search on my channel to find that introductory PydanticAI, where I show you what it is and how to do the whole setup. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Before we move forward, know that you need to have the OpenAI API key for this to work, as well as these other API keys for geocoding, because we're going to be able to fetch the geolocation of these places, as well as the weather API. This one is called Tomorrow.io. So all you do, just go in to Tomorrow.io weather API as such, and then go ahead and get started. I believe you can come here and sign up for free. So it's going to be free. You don't have to pay for anything. Okay, so 3 things. Should have OpenAI API key, which is not free, but it's really cheap, as well as the Tomorrow Weather API and this free geocoding API. Okay, so have all those 3 things ready to go so that we can get started. Install Pydantic. Again, I do have a video where I show you how to set up everything. And so it's very easy. You go to PydanticAI api.pydantic.dev, or just Google, and then you'll find something like this. So it's pip install Pydantic-AI. So hit enter, and I already have that. So it takes literally seconds. So let's go ahead and clear. And everything you want to put here, say pip install, say Tavily -Python as such. So we're going to use Tavily as the dependency that will help us to hit the Tavily API to get information. That's another thing that I forgot to show you here that you would need. Go ahead and get started and get the API key. So this will allow us to do the search to find headlines of news and so forth. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to coding. This is where we're gonna put together the agent and the tools and everything. So I'm gonna go through all the steps so that you really get how to put an agent and its tools together using the PydanticAI. First, we're going to import a lot of things here, but what I want you to keep in mind is that we are importing Tavily into AI, getting the agent, the model retry, and the run context. All of these are classes and dependencies that come with PydanticAI, so that's very helpful. But also, I have this load.env, so that means you have to have load.env installed. If you don't, just go ahead and say pip install, I think it's python.env, like that, -.env. Make sure that you have that installed. Usually comes with Python, I think. So if not, just make sure you have that. And of course, we have this Pydantic, which is the base model, which we'll use, as you see, to create a model for validation purposes. All right, so other things that we have here, you will have access to all this code, but that is the base there. And next, I'm setting up the Tavily client, which we'll use later. So essentially, keep in mind also, this is very important, that you have the .env file where you have the OpenAI API key. You have the weather API key, right, from what I've just shown you, as well as Geo API key and the Tavily API key. You don't need any other key, so just those 1, 2, 3, 4. So next here, I am putting together this Logfire, configuring it. So this is another framework that you can use to help you with logging and seeing how your application is working. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together the data class. So this data class is what we call the dependency. What is a dependency? As we'll see, the whole idea of PydanticAI is that we're going to be creating dependencies as a class and instantiate that, and that is what is going to be injected into the agent or anywhere else that we want. So the idea is that the agent will then have all these dependencies, meaning if the agent needs to go and hit a certain API, which is the case that you will see here, then all of that is going to be stacked into the dependency class. So it is a very simple class, but is annotated with the data class as you see here. Now I'm going to go ahead and comment out a few things because we're not ready for them yet. So we'll talk about these two later. Now what's happening here? Notice that we have this annotation, or rather the decoration, that we say add data class. So this internally, the compiler is going to look at this and say, this is a data class. So essentially it's just a class, very simple class that has fields, and internally is going to be instantiated as a normal class, which will have fields as well as the init classes and everything to create an actual class to be used. That's what's exactly happening internally here. So we are saying the dependencies for whatever else that we want to happen in our code later is that we need to have a client. What is this client? Well, the client is the async client, which we are importing from HTTPX. So HTTPX here is going to allow us to, later you will see, to say .get to hit a certain endpoint, API endpoint, right? That's a dependency because we need that for this to function. And then the other dependency here is the weather API key. As you see here, is a string type or is a none, okay, for safeguarding. And we have Geo API key as well as the Tavili API key. So any other dependencies that you need, you put them under this class. Okay, very good. Okay, so next what we'll do is we're going to create the actual agent. So I'm going to copy the code. So to create the agent is very simple in that you just say agent, right? So we have weather agent, we need to pass in this case the model. Now we can pass any kind of models that we need. In this case, to make it simpler, I'm using OpenAI model. Now you could have used GPT-4o, but I'm going to use Mini because it's cheaper and smaller, and for what we need here, that's enough. Next, you see we have the system prompt. It's a prompt. We're telling the agent what it needs to do, what it knows and what it needs to do and how it needs to do things. So we're saying be concise, reply with one sentence only, and then write the weather in the location as well as giving the temperature in both Celsius and Fahrenheit. Also, show the lat and long of the location. Make sure to include emojis to make the response more engaging. Write also a short Heroku-style poem about the weather as well as the top 5 news articles for the day in the location, in that location. Okay, so this is just what I put together, but you can see you can go crazy with this, okay? Because this is where you are prompting the agent. Now, the fun part now is with the agent, as I said before, we can inject the dependencies that the agent depends on for it to function properly. So now you say deps type and you pass in the deps class. So it will know, oh, whenever I run, I need to include the deps, the dependencies with me. And what kind of dependency it is? Just a data class, which later we'll see we're going to instantiate that because this is not instantiated, just a class. We're going to create the object and then it's going to be passed along. But it needs to know, the agent needs to know that it needs the type, it's going to be deps, which is in this case, a data class. All right, very good. All right, and also we can pass other things. We'll talk about that, but most importantly, we also pass the retries. So the default retries is 2. What that means is that when the agent goes out and there's tools, as you will see, it will know how to call certain tools automatically, knows what to do, right? But we're saying here the retries have to be only 2 times. So it tries once, if there's nothing, tries again, and there's something, that's great. And by the second time there's nothing, the third time is going to be just an error because it will assume that we're done. We don't do try again to call whatever tool that needs to be called. And if you want to see things, you can hover over already in this class instantiation here, and you can see all the properties or all the variables, all the things that you can pass along to the agent. Results try, which is the one we have tools, we have all that stuff. Very good. So at this point, actually, we have the agent. We don't have the tools. As it is, I can actually run this agent and get some information out of it. Okay, how do I do that? Okay, so I'm going to put the code here. So I define the main function, and this main function, because part of the dependency is to have the weather API, the Geo API key, the Tavili API key, and all of that. So I'm getting all that stuff here. I'm setting it up, and then this is where I instantiate our dependencies, because we need that dependencies, the actual instantiation, the actual object, to be passed along when we say weather agent.run. Okay, so going back, what's happening here? Well, what we do is that we're saying dependencies, we put that in a variable, and we say client is going to be async client, the actual object, so that we can do the HTTP.get or post, or whatever we wanted to do to send a signal to the API or so forth. And then we have the weather API, we pass in the key, which we pull from the environment variables. We do the same for a Geo API and Tavili API. Okay. Now, these dependencies must be attached, because that's what we decided that the agent needs. It doesn't mean that we have to use everything that this dependency is dictating. Okay. It's just that we have to have that set up ready in case the agent needs to use that. And so here we say result and we say weather agent.run, and then we pass the what is the weather in Tokyo. And importantly, that's when we pass dependencies here. Now, if you hover over for run, you can see we pass in user prompt, which is this that you saw there. Okay. And then we have message history. If we want to pass that, we'll see later. The model, we know the model already, what this agent is passing. And you see you have depths here. This is dependency. It says the type that you need to pass is depths, which is dependency class. Incidentally, that is indeed what we created here. And so we instantiate our dependencies and we pass in that object to say, okay, now when you run, you have your dependencies, you have all the things that you need for you to be able to do what needs to be done. In this case, it's just very simple. I just want to show you that this works. So let's go ahead and give it a run. As you see, we're just saying result.data to get result and just show in the console the weather agent. And obviously I expect this to hallucinate everything because we're not calling anything, because we don't have everything, all the tools set up. So it's going to just use the model to make stuff up, which is okay. At least we know it works. So you can see the weather in Tokyo is sunny and pleasant today. That's very hallucinatory. That's, as you can see there. So it says the weather in Tokyo is sunny and pleasant today, right? Hallucination. And temperature is that, and gives us the latitude and longitude. And there is the poem. And of course, it also hallucinated the articles and everything. So all of this is actually coming from our agent. It didn't go and call any tools because it just doesn't know what to do with it. Okay, there's no tools to call. So the agent itself just took the model, which is OpenAI GPT-4o mini, and hallucinated something because that was the prompt that we gave it to do. So the agent is working, except it's not telling us the truth. It's okay. We're going to fix that. Okay, so the first tool that we're going to create is going to be the get lat and longitude function, which is going to be a tool. Now, how do we make a tool so that the agent knows how to call it? Well, it's very simple. Right below here, I'm going to say at. Notice that it's going to call the weather agent tool like this. Now, notice the important part is that here is that internally, PydanticAI knows that we have a weather agent. It has the same name as the weather agent that we gave here. If we had a different name, this annotation or decoration would be totally different. So now whatever we pass or write below here, the function we pass here, it's going to be exactly a tool. It's going to be read as a tool when it comes to the agent when it runs. So what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to create an async function. We're going to define, I should say. So get, and inside here, we need to pass a few things. What we want to pass is we want to pass what we call the context. The context is going to be an object that is going to take in this case, the dependencies, which is what we created here. This is how it works. So I'm going to just say CTX, okay? And then this context here, it's going to be a run context type. And then I'm going to pass along something in this run context type. Now, this run context type is a type that comes already with Pydantic. What I'm going to pass here is just a list or array of dependencies like that. Now, it passed along a lot of stuff here. I'm just going to delete all of that. So next, what we're going to do, we're going to pass here another one called location description, which is going to be a string type. And all of that is going to return a dictionary, which is going to be a string. And in this case, I want it to be a float. The question is, okay, what's really going on here? Okay, why is this returning a float? The reason being is because actually when we return something here, it should be a float. So it's going to be something like, so what we're saying here is that this dictionary is going to be a string as a key, and the value is going to be a float, which is exactly how the latitude and longitude is set up. So we have lat as the key, and the actual number, which is a float, this is the longitude. Make sense? And so that is the expectation of this tool function. It's a tool when it returns something. Now let's go back here. So this context here, we're passing this run context information about the current call, if you hover over, it tells you that. And then we say we're going to pass the dependency. So that means then we have access to our dependencies object through this context here, because we're saying this context is of type run context, which contain dependencies, right? Depends, in this case, this class, data class here, this object, all right? That's exactly what's happening. So we have access to that, and as well as location description. So this is the text type there. We are going to pass what we call the doc string. What does that mean is that we want to make sure that internally things are called appropriately. So this was added just like this. So I'm going to remove all of that because I already have what needs to be there. And so I'm going to do that real quick. So I have this, and I'm going to paste it in here. Now, the thing that you need to be aware of, you may think, well, why do I even have to do this? The reason why you have to actually add this doc string is because internally, the AI, all these models, PydanticAI, and all these tools, they actually read this, believe it or not, because this is what we call contextual data. It gives context of what's happening. So now, internally, the tools are going to say, okay, what is this function or this tool do? Well, it gets the latitude and longitude of location. What are the arguments? Well, CTX, context, is the context. Duh, right? And then we have location description. What is that? Well, that field represents a description of a location. So we have this, and we are returning this lat and long. Now, we don't really need this at this point. We're actually going to get something from the API, and that's what we'll show in a second here. We said that we have access to the CTX, right? The context, which means we have access to our depths or dependencies. What that means is that I can put an if statement here to say, go to the dependencies and then go to depths. What is that? Well, if you go back here, dependencies, and go depths, you can go and get the Geo API key, right? So the Geo API key is possible for us to get to that because the dependencies has indeed this field here, right? And so that means we can check. If it's none, then we can raise a value error, or because we just feeling good today, we can just go ahead and return a false, a dummy latitude and longitude like this. Very good. In any other case, if all is good, then we're going to go ahead and call our API, location, latitude, and longitude. To do so, first we need to have params. So the params here, it's going to be a dictionary that has all the parameters that we need. So you can see here, we can say, for instance, the key. Instead of key, I'm going to call this, let's start with API key as such. So we can get the API key because whenever, you will see in a second, whenever we want to call an API, we need to pass these parameters to say we are authenticated, authorized to go and do X, Y, and Z. In fact, I'm going to pull this below that. And then the other parameter here is going to be the Q, which is indeed the query. Now look what's happening here. Location description. What does that mean? Well, it is a description of a location. So that is actually going to be the query we're going to pass along with API key and everything so that we can get the current latitude and longitude of the current location. And all of that is going to be inferred locally, internally by PydanticAI because we have this guide here in the form of docstring. Okay, so now that we have these params, now we're going to use it so that we can use the client, which incidentally, we can get that from our dependencies class, deps class, right? We can get the client to do what we need to do, in this case, to call the API. What I'm doing here, I'm putting everything with log fire span, okay? And then what I do here is I do the same thing, context, go to the dependencies class, and in that, go to get client. It knows that it has client. In fact, if you say command click, it will know it goes straight to this client here. Do you see what's going on? And so when that happens, then I can say get. So the get, that's when we pass in the actual URL. This is the URL that will allow us to go and fetch something in the API. And so for that, is expected for us to pass the params. The params will contain the query, which is location that is inferred from our tool, right? And then the API key that we know to get through going to the context, go to the deps, and go to get geo API key. Okay, very good. And then we just get all that information. And then if there's some data, we want to return this structure here. So latitude, get the latitude, and get longitude like that. Very good. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to change something here. Instead of data, I'm just going to get the whole payload. I'm going to remove the data just for you to see the whole payload that comes in, and everything stays the same. So we're going to run this. Now, internally, notice that we just say weather agent.tool. We are appending that onto this get lat long. The agent is going to have access to this tool because we are attaching, this is a way of attaching this get lat long as a tool for our agent. So let's go ahead and run this, and hopefully we're going to see something. Okay, at least we know that the actual latitude and longitude is not going to be something that is hallucinating. Now, in this case, because Tokyo as a city in the world, well known, we're probably going to get exactly the same, and all large language models already are trained on that, okay? But I'll show you that it's different when I change the name of the place. All right, let's go ahead and run this again. Okay, so it goes through the process. Now you can see it's calling the tool. Let me go back here. Look at all payload. So it goes through the process. We have the prompt and model request run step 1. So handle model response. So it goes ahead and running the tool, get lat long. It knew I need to go and run this tool because inside of my prompt, it says that I need to find latitude, location of this place. Okay, so calling Geocode API, and then step 3, we have the response. So you can see now the system prompt shows everything. This is the whole payload of what happens. And then we have what is the weather in Tokyo. Gives us the date, current date, and then tool to call. Look at this, get lat long, and look at that. Location description is Tokyo. It inferred from our query. It knew right away the location description is Tokyo. And that is the keyword that it's needed to pass along so that it knows what is the lat and long that it needs to go and get for what location. And we have 35, 68, 139. So I think, again, the hallucination was right because it's a known fact, right? Latitude and longitude don't change, really. Okay, so that's what happens here. You can see how many times the get lat long was called and all of that, and the whole payload. And then, of course, we have the content. It says the weather in Tokyo, currently sunny with that. I know this is hallucinating because we don't have that information, but the latitude and longitude, it is indeed correct at this point. Now I'm going to show you that this is true. I'm going to change location. If I come down here, instead of in Tokyo, what is the weather like? I think that's the correct way to say, in Sao Paulo, like this. Okay, let's go ahead and run again. We should see something different in terms of the latitude or longitude, if indeed the tool is being called correctly, which is, right? Let's go ahead and run. Okay, Sao Paulo, very good. Too many requests. I know this error happens. You can see too many requests. I think it's because I probably put we're like in Sao Paulo. So what happens is that Sao Paulo is actually one word, so it's thinking it's two, so that's why it's not liking it. Let's just find a different place that's just one word. Let's say just London. Okay, it's getting that, calling Geo. Okay, very good. And voila, you can see that this should be the lat and long of London. Okay, and the rest is just still hallucination. At this point, we're able to put together a tool that the agent's able to call upon when it needs to get information. So that's real good. Now, let's go ahead and create another tool. And you know the mechanics. That's why I was going a little bit slower, so you understand exactly what's happening. That is the thing that I enjoy doing, is I want you to understand the code, what is really happening. Because once you see the patterns, it's really easy to build things yourself. Okay, so we have this tool. Let's create another tool. The next tool we'll create is going to be the tool that allows us to fetch the weather information of that location, that latitude, the location that we're asking about. So first, again, weather agent.tool, and then we create the tool here. So we pass in the context and pass all of the dependencies, depths, and we'll also need to pass the latitude and the longitude, which are floats, and return string as the key, and the value is any. Okay, so essentially that's what we're saying. We return string, and the value could be anything. Could be string, could be numbers, doesn't matter. Okay, so what's happening inside now? The same thing. We have the doc string here, get the weather at location, and arguments is the CTX. This is for context, latitude and longitude. Very good. And now we're checking if the weather API is not. Same thing we did before, just a different case here. Okay, and if no API is provided, then we're just gonna pass in this dummy data. Okay, and next what we'll do, we create the parameters. Now this is something that you need to look into to know exactly what parameters to pass. You need to know this by going to the API and point to the documents and see exactly how what is needed for us to pass, so that we can get the information we need. Okay, so that's why always go to the actual API docs and learn that. Okay, but essentially we're just passing the API key through the context again and get the weather API, different now. And then the location here, we're pulling the location, getting the latitude and longitude. Now, where is this coming from? Well, it's coming from our get weather tool, because we are requiring to pass along these two. At this point, we should have this. Why? Well, because in the get lat long would have been called by the point by the time we call the get weather. So also you notice that this is sequential. The order in which you are calling these tools is very important, because if you call get weather and the lat and long it's not set, then obviously we're going to have issues. And then we call the API by using the client from our dependencies, right? It's a get, same thing we did, passing the URL and the parameters that we need, that we created here. And then we get that information. In this case, we're getting data, values. Now, I know this because we go to the documentation. It tells you what is the result that comes as. So we're probing in into the data and get the values. And of course, we have this code lookup here, so we can see if it's a certain code that is coming in. It's going to be mostly clear, partly cloud, all of that. All of this is just to make our user interface, whatever we are bringing in and showing, make it look good. So what we're returning from this is this other dictionary here. So I have temperature and description. The temperature is going to be values, temperature apparent, and then we do some rounding there and add Celsius. And then we have the lookup to add into that description. So essentially, if the code is 7101, it's going to be heavy ice pellets, something like that. Now that I have everything set up, I created yet another tool. I don't have to do anything. All I have to do now is test it out and run again. Ah, beautiful. So let's clear this and run again. And this time you will see what happened. Look, get lang. Now get weather is called. And it's calling everything, pulling everything together. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we see the same thing. Now, if you go back, you can see tool to call, location, it's London. And then tool to call, get weather. And look at lat that it was passed along. It is exactly the same as London, because that's what's called. That is what it got before. Let's see. You see? 51, negative minus 0, 12. And we should see 61, 51, I mean. Right, 51. That's been passed along in the get weather, which is needed, and that. So they're all exactly equal, the same. The final response says data, in this case, currently in London, cloudy with temperature of that. Now we know this is true because we're getting the actual temperature, and then this is true also latitude, and of course this is also true, right, because it's actually supposed to write this, the agent, the model. And now we know that the top 5 news is still hallucinating because we haven't hit that API. All right. Very good. So this is working. I hope this is making sense. One thing I want to let you know is that if you are interested in getting deeper into AI, building AI tools, I have a community with amazing members right now who are building amazing AI applications. We have code, we have templates, we have calls, we have each other, we have Q&A sessions, we have all the things that you need to actually be equipped and start building AI solutions. So it's a community that I'm very proud of. If you're interested, I should have a link somewhere in the description. Go ahead and join. I would love to have you. Okay, let's continue here. So this is making sense, right? Very good. Now, we've done that. Next, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and create yet another tool that will hit the Tavili API so that we can get some sort of news around that area, right? That location. Again, the same thing. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, let's go ahead and get that tool. So now we have the tool. So this is, again, weather agent, tool, we'll call this search. So now I'm passing context here. Now remember, the context we could name whatever we need. In this case, I could name search data. Now you can see the run context here. I'm passing a different kind of dependency essentially. So I'm passing this search data class. What is this? So at the top, just like we have this data class, the deps, I'm going to add the search data class as this. And then I'm going to pass that along as a dependency like this. So what would happen now? You see that we have this date string issue. The reason being is because I want to get the current date, and that's important. Why? Because when we hit the AI, the API I should say, to get news, we want to make sure that it's very contextual for today, the current date. And so I need to get the current date, today's date. And for that, there's always code for that. I say current date and say date.now to get the current date, and I'm going to convert that into a string as you see here. So that is indeed what's passed along here in our deps. And so this search data class here, you can see that we're passing that as the context so that inside we can use that. Now you can see you also pass the query and the query number. Okay, these are pieces of data that we need when we pass through, when we want to invoke the Tavili API to get information. Okay, so the same thing, we just returning a dictionary of string any, and then we have the doc string here specifying get the search for keyword query and keywords to search. Now I'm printing here the query number and the query so you can see what's going on. But most importantly, you can see now the max results, because this is the piece field that we need to pass when we get search or when we invoke the get search for our API. Okay, the Tavili API. So that's why I'm getting these max results from search data. Again, it's just the context. You can name whatever you want and go to the search data class, which has that field. What field? These max results, which we said. And so then we pass that along when we call Tavili get search context. If you have over, you can see we have query, search depth, topic, days, and so forth. And so now what we can do is we see that we have max results here. It says int 5. Well, that's what we're saying here. So essentially we can change. If I go back to, let's go back to max results, the field here, you see says 5. That is, I think we want 5 or change this number. Okay. So you can always change how many results you want to be returned. So now you see Tavili get search and we pass the query. What is the query? What is the query that we need to attach to get information from? So news, I appended here, say I want news in the query. So the query is going to be, for instance, Tokyo, London, whatever place that you want to get information from. Okay. And then we pass the max results, which is what we got here. And then we get the results. Okay. Again, I can stop here. I don't have to do anything. If I run, all of those tools are going to be called accordingly and get me the results. Let's see if this is true. Let's save. Let's clear and let's run. Okay, London, search 5, query 5, very good. So now I went ahead and did everything. Let's go back and so you can see exactly. So we went and called this tool, got that information, then we called the get weather, got the information, then we searched the news. Very cool. And so all this payload you've seen before, we can go all the way, you can see all the things being called, and then we have the search news. So the search news went ahead and searched the news and got all this information here. Look, Metro Co UK. This makes sense because UK, London is in UK. So you know this is not hallucinating anymore. It's actually hitting the API and getting the correct information. And so we got all this information. So then we pass all that information we received. It's a lot. And we compact everything to get the final response. So now you can see it says the weather in London is this, latitude and longitude is this, and the poem, of course, the AI did that. But now we hit the top 5 news articles and pulled in the top 5 news articles. Look at this. And with the links and everything, and there are 5 of them. All right, so just like that, ladies and gentlemen, you can see that this workflow is working and it's getting exactly what we wanted to get. So I hope this is making sense. I hope you're understanding the mechanics on how to put this very simple but useful workflow using PydanticAI. I have to say I'm very excited about PydanticAI. I think it's really good. It's really good, as you see. Okay, very good. So we have the basis. We understand how all this works. Now, how do we take all this work and put that into Streamlit and UI, user interface? That way we can actually see things and we can chat with it and see the results and see the weather information and the news and all of that in the UI. Let's go ahead and do that. Right, so to do that, I have another file called weather streamlit like that. So click it's empty and make sure, of course, to say pip install streamlit like this for this to work. Okay, everything is there already. Very good. And so what we'll do now, it's very, very, very simple. I have all the code, so I don't want to bore you. And so we do all the imports, and some of the imports are not actually needed, but it's okay. So you see something that is similar here. You have this async client as client here. This is the setting up of the weather API, all the APIs, and I have some debugging here. That's okay. And so what will happen now is that we also instantiating this dep, all the deps, right? So this is essentially what we did in our main inside of weather agent, where we were seeing everything in the console. Okay, so the difference here now is that we are running the stream. Say here we're calling the weather agent, right? So we're importing the weather agent, as you see here, from weather agent, import weather agent and deps and all that. And so we are calling run stream. Notice the difference. If you go back here, we're saying what? Run. Just run, just give us the information. That's what we see in our console. But here we say run stream because we want to run it stream. We want to run it as stream so that we can get pieces as they come in, and it just has this constant evolving piecing showing on the screen. Okay, so essentially here we're also making sure that we are passing the message, the last message that was added, into the message history list. That way we have that history behind, right? The memory essentially. Okay, that's all that's happening here. And then we print the results so we can see, and then we're streaming those, and then each message that comes in, we're streaming so we can see. Okay, so this is the GUI part of things. So we will see PydanticAI weather chatbot, and so we're making sure all the sessions are set up, and we're putting everything into perspective here and getting all those responses, generating asynchronously to fetch responses and put them into the user interface. So that's all we're doing here. What is important to remember though is that we are indeed using stream here, run stream, and get those pieces and start adding them inside of the user interface. Also, because of Streamlit, Streamlit has already a library within Streamlit that allows you to create a chat essentially quickly. That's why you see here we have this ST chat message. So this actually inserts a chat message container that is already ready for you to use. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this so we can actually see things working in the backend. So to run this, you say Streamlit, run, and notice it's weather, Streamlit, that pie like this. So let's go ahead and hit run. And there you go. So we have PydanticAI weather chatbot, I should say. Very good. So let's give it a try. So let's say the weather like in Seattle, Washington. Let's see what will happen. Okay, so all those things that you already know, they're happening in the backend, right? Hitting all those points and getting the latitude and everything. And look at this. It works, right? So we have, it's cloudy day in Seattle. We have the temperature in Celsius and Fahrenheit. We have the latitude and longitude. And you can see the things you can do. You could actually create a map here and pull this longitude and latitude and show that information on a map. Easily, that's something you can do, right? And then a poem in Seattle skies, a blanket gray, blah, blah, blah. And we have the top 5 news articles. And the great thing about this is that all of these news articles should be contextual, meaning they have happened in the past 24 hours or 48 hours at least, okay? So if you click on one of this, you can see it takes you exactly to a place such like this to go and see the news. And there you have it. So it works, right? And as you continue, you can again say, for instance, what was the last place? So you can see that it actually has memory. If I hit enter, it should say Seattle. Okay, the last place mentioned was Seattle, and even gives us the location and longitude and latitude, which is exactly what we have here. Nice, very nice. Let's try one more time. What is the weather like in Paris? Yeah, let's say Milan. And there you go. So it gives us, this is the weather like, what's the weather like, and latitude and longitude. The nice poem, and look at this, the article. So let's click on one to make sure. Yep, that is indeed Milan, in Milan. All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you got to see how to really think about how Pydantic works in code, how you can put together agents with all these different tools that do different things, right? There are dependencies that you inject into the agent. All right, so rewatch this video if things are not quite making sense, but I promise you, if you understand these mechanics as I've shown you, you should be really good at starting putting together more complex agents using PydanticAI. I'm excited about PydanticAI. I hope you are as well, and this is exciting. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe, like, and share, and always leave comments in the description to tell me how wonderful I am. Just kidding. You can just say that you like the video. That's all. That's all, really. Thank you so much for your time. Till next time, be well.